I'm Claire Smith and welcome to my channel. So today's video is all about DedCool fragrances. I feel like this brand is actually quite big in the US, but they're not really something I ever hear about on the UK market. I saw a sample set and I thought I'd just try them out. So if you haven't seen me before, I make videos all about fragrance. I talk about fragrance science, I talk about psychology around fragrance, and I also talk about fragrance history. So if that kind of thing interests you and you haven't already done so, then please do consider subscribing. I also do these kinds of review videos for particular brands that I try out. I quite often buy a sample set and make a review video. So if this kind of thing interests you, then please press the like button. So DedCool are a brand that launched in California back in 2018. They consider themselves to be a cruelty-free brand and also to be a vegan brand. And they're also touting themselves as biodegradable and also carbon neutral. They market all of their fragrances as unisex. So I think they have a couple of sample sets available. I have their Bestsellers Sample Set, which retails for £24, and it contains 6 of their fragrances. I think the more modern version of this sample set has extra milk in it, but I don't have the more modern version. I have the older version of this sample set. So they also market their fragrances as 15ml, and that retails for £24 in the UK, and the 50ml fragrances are priced at £71. So let's get on with the review. What did I think? So the first fragrance I tried was called Taunt, and Taunt is described by the brand as creamy and alluring. They describe it as watching vanilla clouds in the sky and say it smells like daydreaming about your first perfume. And they describe it as feeling like a coming of age story. So what did I think? So Taunt is a cozy vanilla. It's a bit fluffy and it's also quite sweet, more so than vanilla is in nature really. It's just quite sweet overall. I describe this type of vanilla as a cupcake frosting type of vanilla, but with a citrus and also floral edge to it. The opening to this fragrance really made me think of Britney Spears' Fantasy, but less fruity and softer. If I had to pin this fragrance to a moment in time, I'd put it in the 90s. It smells slightly retro to me. This fragrance to me has a similar vanilla to the vanilla that I've smelt in fragrances like Green Lover by Lolita Lempicka. This fragrance also does remind me of Tic Tacs, just like Green Lover does. With this one, I describe it as a lime and mint Tic Tac, but only very slightly. As this fragrance begins to dry down, it really doesn't stay as smooth as it does in the beginning. It becomes more textured. I had a really strange experience with this fragrance. The first time I tried this, I kind of dismissed it. I couldn't really smell it properly. And then the next day, I could smell it really strongly. And I'm not quite sure what's caused that or whether I just became anosmic to it. But ever since, I've been able to smell it quite clearly. Something I did notice when I was trying Taunt out, and in actual fact the rest of the range as well, was that it was incredibly oily. And the fragrance once sprayed would stay on my skin for a long time before it evaporated enough to not be in an oily pool. And I'm not sure whether it's just these samples, perhaps they've been kept for a while, perhaps they're older. I'm really not sure why these fragrances are so oily, and I'd be interested to try a full bottle and see whether they are actually as oily as these samples. But I think really overall with Taunt, I don't have strong feelings either way with this one. I don't find it unpleasant, but I equally don't feel like this is a vanilla for me, and I don't feel like this is a vanilla that I need in my life. I just don't find it that interesting. So that's Taunt. So the next fragrance is imaginatively named Fragrance 02. So what did I think to this one? Well, the brand describes this as troublesome and sweet. And their tagline for this one is ask for forgiveness, not permission. And they very cheesily describe this as smelling like heat, friction, and a name that you already forgot, saying it feels like bad behaviour. So what did I get from this one? So this to me opens quite green, but also a little bit aquatic and also dry berry fruity. It's a very dry feeling fragrance, even though it does have that aquatic feel, which is really a bit of a tautology. I'm really struggling to describe this one because it is a bit weird. So looking at the notes, I would imagine it's the juniper that's giving that aquatic feeling freshness. The green in this fragrance really smells to me like a wilting bunch of chamomile. It's really not a fresh chamomile, it's more like it's slightly sagging. This to me feels quite chalky, and it also reminds me of that time in summer where things are neither green nor yellow. They're not dead, but they're sort of a little bit spent, not verdant and green and healthy. There's also something a little bit menthol here, which could be the patchouli. The patchouli does feel quite green overall. As this dries down, it turns a little bit leathery, but it's just a dry kind of sweetness as well, along with the leatheriness. It's really a minty green patchouli with a slightly almost smoky, creamy feel to it. If you don't like patchouli, especially green patchouli, you're not going to enjoy this fragrance. I'm not the biggest fan of patchouli when it goes a little bit minty, and here it does smell a bit minty. So I think this one's a no for me, but it is an interesting fragrance. So that's Fragrance 02. So the next fragrance is Fragrance 03, and it's called Blonde. So the brand described this one as dewy and spicy, and their tagline for this one is, "What if you could stop time?" And they say it smells like narcotic leather and black petals, and they say that it feels like silencing the noise. So what did I think? So this one smells like yellow and white florals to begin with. It's very solar feeling. To me, it smells like you're smelling a bunch of yellow daffodils to begin with. It's got a slightly watery feel to it, but it also smells quite petally. There's also a slight pepperiness here that appears more and more as the florals disperse as this dries down. This also smells slightly fruity as it dries down. I would say a bitter, watery fruit as it dries down with a slight peppery greenness. Really, overall, this fragrance makes me think of a red grapefruit sprinkled with pepper next to a lily. So I think for this one, I really liked the opening. I liked how floral it was, and it just dried down to something I was less excited by. This fragrance made me think most of smelling dying chrysanthemums. It's just not something that I really want to smell of, even though I did like the beginning of the fragrance. It just wasn't me overall. This is definitely one of the more interesting fragrances in this set though, and I can see somebody out there really loving this one. So that's Fragrance 03 Blonde. So the next fragrance is called Milk, and I feel like this is probably their most popular fragrance. So Milk is described as a universal musk, and their tagline for this one is, "You might as well, it smells familiar, like warm, clean skin. Feels like you've owned it all your life." So what did I think of Milk? Well, to be honest, I was a bit underwhelmed. I couldn't really smell it the first time I sprayed it, and I was waiting and waiting and waiting, and I didn't really get anything. So then the second time I tried it again, and I could kind of get some texture initially, and then it just sort of disappeared again. And then about 20 hours later, I could smell something, and it smelled like a sweet, clean, skin-like musk. Third time I tried it, I didn't get that at all. I got something that was more faint and more in the beginning, but I didn't get the dry down later on. It smelled slightly floral, maybe even slightly ambretty, but I mean slightly on the scale of the nano scale of perfumery. It's really not a very definite fragrance, and I think in fairness it's meant for layering, but I'm really not sure why you would layer this when you can get much punchier musks which are going to add more to a fragrance than this. Maybe there's some kind of magic that happens when this is combined with other things. But at the moment, I feel like I'm a character in The Emperor's New Clothes, not really smelling what other people smell. I think this is quite expensive for a fragrance I can hardly smell. So yeah, not for me. So that's Milk by DedCool. So the next fragrance is called Madonna Lilly, and their tagline for this one is, "It's floral with a dash of pepper. We bottled a power suit. Smells like hitting the ground running. Feels like fingerprints on a glass ceiling." I mean, they're inventive with these taglines. I mean, yeah. So this one is a spicy cardamom fragrance, and the unusual thing about this is there's a play-off between warm and cool. Normally cardamom to me is cool, but here it's quite warm, at least initially. I think that's the pepperiness. It's quite fresh, and there's also a very mild oak moss here. It's woody and aromatic too, and there's also a smell of Chinese five spice to me, so something like a Szechuan pepper kind of smell. It warms up as it dries down as well, so the cardamom fades back and the oak moss amps up. To me, Madonna Lilly is the one that I imagine someone in a business suit wearing. It's the smartest and the freshest of the fragrances here, but it's not sharp, it's quite soft and gentle, this one. I think we've all smelt this suited, booted scent profile a lot, but actually I like this one because I don't just smell pure ambroxan as you do with a lot of this kind of genre of fragrances. I find the choice of the name of Madonna Lilly really perplexing with this one. I don't understand how it relates to how the fragrance smells, nor what the fragrance is trying to achieve. I just don't think this fits at all. And I think it would probably put off people who were looking for this type of scent profile from trying it, because if you want something that isn't this, you're not going to pick it up and spray it because you're going to be expecting lily, and you don't get that. This fragrance really wasn't for me, but I don't think I'm the target market for this one. I think if you don't want floral and if you want something quite businessy, this might be the one to go for. So that's Madonna Lilly. So the final fragrance in the set is called Red Dakota. And Red Dakota is described by the brand as fresh and zingy, unmistakably optimistic. They describe it as smelling like Mediterranean citrus groves and say that it feels like your own personal villa. So I found this one quite interesting. So it opens with a Satsuma peel to begin with. It's soft and sweet, but a little bitter and a bit citrusy as well. And there's also a slight plasticiness here. If I sniff that plasticky smell close up, I get berries, but it's a very artificial smelling kind of berry. And actually, as this dries down, I begin to be reminded of rhubarb and custard boiled sweets. More rhubarb than the custard, but that kind of sugary sweetness along with that sharp rhubarb smell. This is a really odd combination of something sweet but also tart and not bright. I don't really get anything floral here until much, much later, and then it's just a richness rather than anything overtly floral. So yeah, I'd summarise this one as smelling a bit like a rhubarb boiled sweet, but also being slightly warm in feel along with that rhubarb boiled sweet. It's a really odd fragrance. Again, I think this one's probably not for me. I think I've smelt better rhubarbs. I'm not too sure about the plasticky feel, but I did think this one was interesting and I could see somebody loving this. So that's Red Dakota. So in conclusion, I think these fragrances are maybe not for me. I was really curious to try this brand when I saw this sampler set, and I just don't think there's anything here that appeals and makes me want to buy it. But I am intrigued to try the rest of the range. I think these fragrances are going to be a struggle if you like sweet fragrances. They're really, in general, not sweet. And they also have a lot of texture with them, which I think some people might find very off-putting. They also seem to have the same texture for all of the fragrances, or some degree of the same texture for all of the fragrances. And I think if you don't like that kind of almost cloudy feel that you get in fragrances like Green Lover by Lolita Lempicka, you won't like these. I think on the plus side with these fragrances, they did feel very different. They didn't really remind me of other fragrances I've tried, and I like that aspect of them. I think the more inventive fragrances here were Blonde 03, Madonna Lilly, and also Red Dakota. I think I found a few of these a little bit confusing, so Milk and Taunt I seem to get different experiences from each time I tried them. And I'm not sure, even with trying them 3 or 4 times, I really got an overall impression of uniformly how they smell. They seem to change on me each time I wore them. So yeah, please let me know if you've tried DedCool, whether you've had similar experiences to me, whether you would recommend any of the other 6 fragrances in their range. And if you own a sample set or a full bottle and you like one in particular, I'd love to know which one it is and what it is about that fragrance that you love. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.